Hello and welcome to Charch Chat here at Open Sports. I am Paul Charchian from LeagueSafe.com. A number of items to talk about in the aftermath of Week 4 that are relevant to fantasy guys. We begin with the firing of Scott Linehan, probably the biggest story of the week without a doubt. And for fantasy purposes especially, looking ahead, does Linehan's removal help some of these struggling Rams? And the answer is no, unfortunately. Al Saunders really was running that offense already. Had his guys in place, running his schemes, and it wasn't working. Now, Jim Haslett steps up to the head coach. He's a defensive guy. He's not going to tinker with this offense. No chance. So, Al Saunders will remain the primary mover here in this offense. And, I think the only material change is we're going to see Mark Bulger back under center. But beyond that, this is still going to be the Al Saunders offense that struggled a lot so far. And, maybe it gets better with time. Sometimes it takes a month for a new offense to sort of click and gel, but if it, that's the best case scenario. Still, I don't see a big change coming right now. Perhaps you can sell high in Steven Jackson coming off a touchdown, and you can sell the promise of a new head coach, perhaps, maybe. Muhsin Muhammad with a nice game. Interesting that he puts up 8 catches, 147 yards, and 1 touchdown when Steve Smith is back in his second game. When he's his first game back was probably a little bit rusty. Comes here in his second game. Steve Smith has a big game. Defense has to adjust to him, and Muhsin Muhammad takes off and does really well. Not totally surprised. If you look back when Muhsin Muhammad was good before, it was when he was in Carolina, it was Steve Smith. And then he went to be a number 1 receiver for Chicago, and he's just not a number 1 receiver. I mean, Muhsin Muhammad's going to do his damage as a number 2 guy. And we're seeing him fit right back into that spot again now. And so Muhammad, a guy that, available in a lot of leagues, and I think there will be some nice opportunities to start him over the course of the season. Next, let's go to Chad Johnson. He scored a touchdown, and this might be a good opportunity to sell high on him. Well, as high as you can get on Chad Johnson. He's now only scored in 3 of his last 18 games. Those are disappointing stats for fantasy guys, but one of those touchdowns this past Sunday. His next 6 weeks look pretty tough for fantasy guys. There's a bye week in there. There's some really tough matchups, including Dallas, Pittsburgh, and Jacksonville. So, you look at all those things together, and it just doesn't feel like a very good opportunity here for Chad Johnson to right the ship. So, if you got him, trade him, and if you don't have him, don't listen to the guy who's trying to trade him. Matt Schaub, finally good to see him with a rebound with a good game, and this is 3rd game of the season, 303. Those are great numbers, and the numbers we expected more often for him. One of the key things he did differently in this game, Matt Schaub stopped trying to force the ball into Andre Johnson, who just wasn't catching what was thrown to him. Went to Kevin Walter more, and it really paid off. Walter had a big game, and this offense looked a lot better and went all the way to the brink with a very good Jacksonville team. So Houston looks to be heading the right direction, and I think you're going to start seeing them use all of their weapons, including Owen Daniels, a lot more and relying on Andre Johnson a lot less. Johnson, by the way, one of the really big busts so far this season. One of the nice guys who came out of the same game, Matt Jones, we predicted a touchdown for him here at Charch Chat before last weekend's games. If you caught that, I hope that you were able to pay off on the 71 yards and touchdown. He's got twice the receptions and twice the yardage of the next closest Jacksonville wide receiver. Clearly become the go-to guy in that passing game, at least at the wide receiver position, because they still throw a lot to their backs. But this is still a guy with a lot of upside. Seems to have his head on straight, and maybe his arrest in the offseason may ultimately be one of those things that ends up helping him as it turns out down the stretch. Larry Johnson, 2 consecutive good games, almost 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in a game that was shocking by any measure. Denver's defense, just terrible. This might be a good opportunity to sell high on him, get a load of the schedule. Carolina, tough defense to run on, a bye week, and then Tennessee. So not crazy about Larry Johnson for the next 3 weeks anyway, and so you may want to parlay his big game into a trade opportunity for yourself. Thomas Jones has been really disappointing. Now in the opener, he had a nice game, scored 100 yards, 4.6 yards per carry. Now since that time, his yards per carry have gone progressively down in every single game, all the way down to 2.7 this week. Really disappointing. And how do you run for 2.7 yards per carry when your touchdown, the quarterback position is giving you 6 touchdowns? I mean, the Cardinals were just doing all they could do to stop Brett Favre from passing, and he still only ran for 2.7 yards per carry. I I'm a little baffled on this, and if you can't run on the Cardinals in this kind of situation, you're no guarantee to run on anybody ever. So Thomas Jones increasingly becoming a guy that I see as more just a sort of a bye-week fill-in and not an every-week starter by any stretch. Ryan Grant, speaking of some of the biggest busts in the league, he's been tremendously disappointing. Grant so far, now if you go back, no touchdown so far. If you go back a couple of weeks, 3 weeks ago, he had 15 carries for 20 yards. A terrible game against the Lions. Did a little bit better the week after that. Then last week decided he liked that 15 carries for 20 yards so much they'd do it again. Last week, 15 carries, 20 yards. Listen, it seems like this is a typical case of a guy who's strung together a couple of good games, had got his big contract, and then completely flopped. Very, very skeptical about Ryan Grant and his ability to come back successfully and provide meaningful fantasy stats the rest of the year. And if Aaron Rodgers is in fact going to miss some time, that's going to put even more defensive pressure on the running game, and he may be even somehow, if possible, less successful. Last thing I'll mention, Chris Johnson, just so impressed with this kid. If he can run on the Vikings and score a couple of times, anybody can. Not anybody can. He can run on anybody, and he's become a guy that you just start every week regardless of circumstance, opponent, his health, anything. If he's in the game, Chris Johnson is a starter. If you can run on Minnesota, you can run on anyone. There you go. Sorry for prattling on so long. Thanks for sticking with me here and through all these different topics we've had in the aftermath of Week 4 of the NFL season. We'll see you again here at Open Sports.
So you think you can tackle a pro? There's only one way to find out. Click on fantasy at opensports.com.